Okay, I think we're live, and that means you're watching Strega Mystica live, and it's time for me to answer a bunch of inbox messages at once. So I decided I would kill two birds with one stone and do it with a live broadcast since it's been a minute since I've been here. It's been a minute since I've had a chance to do so. And because we're checking out our new software setup in our new studio, because we will be starting with the Inner Alchemy podcast in just 2 weeks from this coming Wednesday night. Or, yes, a week from this coming Wednesday night. I'm sorry, May 4th. I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to check out the software, answer a bunch of your questions that have been coming into the inbox because I really do apologize for not getting back to you. It has been chaotic. And so I'd love to hear from you, especially those who may be watching us live, because you're my extended family, my friends, my colleagues, and the people that I care about. So if you're able to see this and you're on my Facebook friends list, you matter. If you're on my YouTube subscriber list, you matter. If you're on Twitter, you matter. Especially if you're on Twitter right now, because with Elon Musk having taken over, we'll see how long we last on Twitter. But we're going to tackle a handful of topics that I get message bombed about frequently. And this will do one thing. It'll help you to understand my perspective. You see, it's not my intention to change your mind. It's my intention to understand your perspective and to have you respect my right to my own perspective. That's what being an adult's all about. You don't have to like or agree or even respect my perspective itself, but you do have to respect my right to hold a perspective. And I have to respect yours as well. I don't feel compelled to have to respect your perspective itself or your opinion, but I have and will always respect and defend your right to hold an opinion, to have a perspective that's authentically yours, regardless of what that is. So, first of all, for the people who are wanting to jump in to the conversation and comment and join the discussion, because that's what we do during all of our podcasts, and so I want you to feel included. By all means, go ahead and comment. Now, if you're watching this on other platforms, we're streaming live on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Facebook. If you're watching this from any other platform, including the Inner Alchemy Mystery School, you have to go right click on the YouTube video to go into YouTube and say open in a new window, or open the URL in YouTube. I forget what it says. You have to go there so that you're actually logged into your YouTube account to be able to comment. You have to be logged into Facebook to comment as well. So let's go ahead and dive in. And we're going to start with the people, because this is the overwhelming number of messages I've gotten lately. I think possibly because of my series that I did on the holiday season, during the spring holidays, and particularly focused on the teachings of Rav Yeshua the Nazarene. So this is for the people who are bitching and whining because they consider it offensive when I use terms like neo-pagan and Fundy McNugget to describe both neo-pagans and Christian fundamentalists. So first, the easiest way that I can answer most of your messages is by saying, get over it. I'm an academic. My doctorate in theological anthropology, as well as my more than a quarter century of extensive research into the origins of various spiritual traditions, but mostly kind of focusing on the esoteric traditions that pre and post date institutional Christianity, remains one of those inconveniences that I get it. Most people would like to see just disappear, so that they'd like the issue to be gone, so that they could just continue to grumble and whine behind my back. But like it or not, guys, terms like witch and witchcraft and pagan are terms that were used by the Roman and later Anglican Church as a means of weaponizing religion, marginalizing and disparaging people of other spiritual traditions, and were founded on a classist, racist, and just vehemently gender oppressive agenda. They're not words that were used by our own practitioners. Practitioners of the old religions didn't call themselves pagan. The Roman Catholic Church and Orthodox churches did. The practitioners of magic in Europe didn't call themselves witches and they didn't call their practice witchcraft. That was a direct result of mistranslation, willful mistranslation of folk magic practices, animism, spiritualism, and divination, all of which, by the way, we can find plenty of evidence of in the heroes of the Old and New Testament. By the way, who those characters would have practiced all of the same things that our ancestors did all the way up to the modern day. And somehow the church managed to twist the original texts of those spiritual books and mistranslate words willfully. Words like pharmakeia in the Greek manuscript that suddenly got changed from an herbalist to a witch, to make their case that we're somehow, those of us that practice the esoteric, are somehow in allegiance with the imaginary devil that the Christian church made up in the first place. So understand that when I use the term neo-pagan, that's because I understand the difference between pagan and neo-pagan. And I'm an anthropologist, and I'm not going to change that. Second, and this is the point that perturbs, I think, a far greater number of people, especially pop culture podcasters and authors and personalities who complain about and then passive aggressively subtext their posts on social media to address it, but who never seem to be willing to deal with the facts that I've grown up in a culture that has practices of esoteric and occult and magical arts and sciences for millennia as part of that culture. I am an Italian and Sicilian American. I've practiced the esoteric arts of my people for more than 50 years. I've researched other religions throughout Italy and the Afro-Sicilian islands, so that when I say that despite misinterpretations published in the folkloric writings of Charles Leland, a Philadelphia native, one of our homeboys, but who was non-Italian and who had no formal background in anthropology, when I say that Leland got it wrong when he believed that he was witnessing a coven of witches, as he put it, worshiping Diana and Dionysus in the Tuscan Busqueta at the turn of the 20th century, well, I know what I'm talking about. And that shouldn't get so many of you so twisted. It shouldn't get so many of you, worried and neurotic about what I mean. And no, I don't really personally care if you think that Professor Ronald Hutton was right or wrong, because my conclusions and my opinion about this in general has nothing to do with Ronald Hutton and his writings or Margot Adler and her writings. I don't care what you think about neo-pagan elders either, like the late Raven Grimassi, who patently and intentionally lied about an imaginary tradition that he called Stregeria, that he claims to be initiated into, which never existed until he created it as the foundation for a writing project that he was doing. Now, before you start to blow my inbox up again, because so many of you have so little courage to discuss this publicly, I'm not attacking Raven Grimassi, so spare me the dramatics and the histrionics. I've spoken to him about that in general, specifically and in general, about how people feel like they have to make up a backstory in order to create a tradition when there's really no need to do that. I'm sure that for those who love him and appreciate him and worked with him personally, and that number does not include me, I'm sure that those people have many reasons to love and appreciate him. The simple fact is that if you went to Italy today, you would find out that he was a liar, that there was no such thing as Stregeria, that his conflation of the old religion and the practices of magic was just his attempt at repackaging Wicca, throwing a little oregano and basilico on it, a little garlic salt, and now he has a magical tradition that's supposedly Italian American. And so that means that he lied about being initiated, because there was no such tradition. The simple fact, and one that can easily be verified by anyone willing to make the effort to uncover the truth, is that, Italians and Sicilians do not share their traditions with outsiders. period. I promise you, absolutely, that we don't share our traditions with outsiders, and we never will. We never have. We don't gather in covens or boschetti. If we did, I would know about it. We don't initiate people into the worship of a god or a goddess, and we never have. So Leland, if he was telling the truth at all, didn't witness the boschetto of witches. He witnessed something else, which I've personally witnessed, and that is that if his alleged encounter with Maddalena occurred in real life, she wouldn't have been willing to reveal our ways to an outsider, especially not to an American. So she would have told him to come to the local boschetto, a religious cult dedicated to the worship of Diana and Dianus. So it would have been an open liturgy in the old religion. And at that old religious gathering, there would have been people from all walks of life, some of whom might have even included the magical practitioners of the region. But most of the people that would have been there would not have been magical practitioners at all. That's how our culture worked at the turn of the 20th century. It's how it works today. In other words, he was invited to, a church, if you will. He saw an open liturgy, not something remotely connected to the Dianic mysteries, but something that was designed to be open to the public so that we could dispel some of the crazy ideas that these old religions were somehow evil. There would have been a nearby, even larger cult of the Great Mother as a boschetto of Demeter, connected to the Eleusinian mysteries or Eleusinian mysteries, which would have been, quite possibly even what he witnessed, because I don't know to what extent his Italian was that fluent in the Tuscan dialect, but his interpretation, mistaken as it was, became the foundation for fanciful and highly problematic tales that were told by the sexual predator and grifter Gerald Gardner, who was the founder of the first neo-pagan religion. An attempt to combine the magical practices that were mostly reimagined and reconfigured by Gardner, based on some of the practices that Gardner would have gleaned from esoteric wisdom traditions and secret societies in the mid 20th century, to combine that with his understanding of the old religion and what Charles Leland said that he witnessed. And now, just because Gardner, like Grimassi, created his own magical or magic-based neo-pagan religion doesn't invalidate it by any means. Just because he lied about its origin doesn't invalidate it. That's not what this is about. Sure, it calls into question his integrity, just as it does those others who've claimed to have been, initiated in some magical mystery sect that nobody else can find. I might not have respect personally for Gardner or for many pop culture witches, or including Raven Grimassi, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing of value in the traditions that grew out of what they created. It doesn't mean there's nothing of value in those people themselves. So there's a whole lot that's highly sus about the institutional Christian churches and their whole mythology that's wrapped up in the New Testament. But you don't hear people saying that just because we call to question the mythology, that that nothing good has come from it. The New Testament mythology is not really a whole lot different than the lies that Raven Grimassi and Gerald Gardner taught. Somebody made up stories. They plagiarized from older texts. They misrepresented fact. And despite the moral outrage that the Fundy McNuggets have, whose ignorance leads them to miss the underlying value of the mythology, then and who want to pretend that everything has to be taken literally as historic fact. The facts, the science, and the history tell us otherwise, and it's no different in neo-paganism. So I hope that makes it clear to both of those groups that are blowing up my inbox almost on a weekly basis now. I don't disrespect neo-paganism, and while I've been unafraid and unapologetic for my open criticism of the talk show witches of the 1980s with their obscene witches do's and don'ts nonsense, I believe that those people as well have contributed value to the spiritual community. Same with the people that are part of the organized and institutional Christian churches. I don't have to agree with what you do to be able to see the good that you do in the world when you do good. But more importantly, I think that when we look at things like these pop culture witches, that were the television show witches of the 80s, the talk show witches, they've given us some of today's brightest and most ethical minds, and most creative and powerful practitioners and authors and teachers, and yes, new pop culture personalities who do more for advancing healthy spiritual practice than I've ever seen in any other spiritual tradition, including the Abrahamic traditions, the New Age movement, and the Gurukul ashram cults that populated the West from the 1960s onward. Those people that are leading the neo-pagan tradition today and heading up some of these beautiful initiatory traditions are good people producing good works. And they help shape society in a way that I believe transforms the world. So no, I don't hate or disrespect my neo-pagan siblings. I simply don't identify with their religious traditions or any religious tradition. And that brings me to the next thing that's littered my inbox lately. And that's the fact that I've been a bit more vocal in particularly in the past few months about my wholesale rejection of institutional Christianity and Catholicism. Now, I identify as a post-Christian, culturally Catholic, esoteric spiritual practitioner and philosopher. I'm an inner alchemist, a mystagogue, and a social justice warrior. And yeah, it's true. I'm ordained as a Catholic priest and bishop in valid apostolic succession. And yes, there are those who might argue that I should be condemned as a heretic and have my be defrocked and all that other shit. And maybe they're right. I don't know. I'm not interested one way or the other. And yes, I've been a Franciscan contemplative for 42 years. But over those 42 years, I've done the work. And as a result, I've deconstructed Christianity. I found it to be more harmful than helpful, more unhealthy than healing. And I think that you don't have to look very far to find reasons to see the hypocrisy, even in the people that we know who claim to be, great Catholics, great Christians, and who turn out to be little more than hypocrites. I love you too, Deb. It's great to see you. I miss you so much. Just checking out the comments, and this is another one of those new features that is new to this studio. So I'm really glad to see that it's working. And thanks for commenting, Deb, because that lets me know that you're here, lets me know you're watching, touches my heart, and also lets me know how this feature works. So when I say that I reject Christianity, institutional Christianity, I do as an institution. And just as much as I believe that the great Palestinian teacher, Rav Yeshua, Jesus, would have done, I reject the institution of religion, just as he did with the precursors of the rabbinical Judaism that surrounded him during his life. Because I think that we've lost sight, we've lost our way. As when institutions become more important than feeding people, when institutions become more important than calling out war crimes, when institutions become more important than recognizing that there are horrific injustices that are taking place in Florida as voting rights get restricted, as legitimacy of a woman's right to health care gets rejected, when the legitimacy of LGBTQ persons having a place at the table, and when children are being threatened, that just so that we can hold up the religious institutions. And finally, I'm gonna touch on this very, very briefly, because we've got an entire episode with the Inner Alchemy podcast, which returns on May 4th, that will be dedicated to and intersecting with this topic. But there's so many messages that have come into my inbox, and I want that show to be about the incredible panel of people that we have lined up to join this discussion, who will be live on the air with us. And so I just want to personally reflect on some of the comments that some of you have made privately about the recent vile passage of Florida's "Don't Say Gay" bill, and the similar bills that are legislation currently in process in various states of being passed around the country. And it's not the same as I just see here. I found out my ancestry this year. Hey, it's always great to have somebody else that finds the channel, T. I'm glad that you're here. And I'll look forward to you checking out some of the other videos and joining some of the conversations. So back to the "Don't Say Gay" bill. You know, it's not the same as schools finally upholding the Constitution by prohibiting public prayer in school. Because first of all, nobody is in that situation is telling kids that they can't privately pray, as well they should, if that's what their tradition calls them to do before they start their school day. And no, it's not acceptable when some of the morons who've flooded my inbox say they'll respect and support gender diversity and sexual orientation being taught in the schools, when schools are allowed to teach the delusional and patently false notion that this country was founded as a Christian nation. So first of all, no, this country was not founded as a Christian nation. The founders themselves weren't even Christian. They were deists. So do your homework, learn history the way that it was, and stop promoting just a total bullshit lie that's used generally to promote fundamentalist Christian overtake of the government. And unlike preventing children from being forced to endure religious superstitions being imposed upon them in public schools, which is wrong, unconstitutional, and a clear violation of church and state, and might result, when violated, in little Johnny or little Susie rolling their eyes in their head when children are prohibited from being able to pray. And yeah, the Vikings that definitely got here first, Deb. You know, but the founders of the United States is what I should have said. You know, when you know, little Johnny or little Susie is either forced to participate in school prayer or forced to abstain from public school prayer, they might roll their eyes. They might go home and say, hey, you know, I had problems in school. But when children are prohibited from being able to discuss things like gender constructs and marriage equality, sexual orientation, and civil rights, then we've created a culture, as has been the case for the past 5 decades, that allows suicides to increase and mental health issues to abound, a society in which violence against those who are gender nonconforming or LGBTQ or happen to have been born female goes unchecked and unpunished, and we erode the human rights that this country's laws and constitution were crafted to protect in the first place. So make no mistake, there is no other side. Nobody is calling for children to be taught something that's above their level of understanding. You're either in favor of human rights and protecting children, or you're not. And if you're supporting this kind of legislation, you're on the wrong side of history. You're uninformed, you're uneducated, and you're immoral. Engage with members of the LGBTQ plus community, including me, if you can't find anyone else to talk to. And I'll tell you, as a gender nonconforming queer person, I'll tell you what it was like to be sexually abused by predator priests in the Catholic Church, who only knew that I was a prospective victim because the church told me I had to confess that I was queer to a priest, who would later weaponize my confession and use that information to try to fuck me. Ask me about the number of times and the ways that I've actively considered suicide to be a better alternative than trying to carve out my place at the table as a non-binary person who even gets marginalized by the LGBTQ community because they think I still need to decide, or I'm afraid to decide, whether I'm a trans femme person or trans masked person or not. When I'm not either one of those things, I simply don't buy into the harmful binary gender construct and believe it's harmful and flawed, the same way that I believe that the race construct that didn't exist until the 16th century is harmful and flawed and unnatural as well. So those responses should address the messages that are coming into my inbox, and the people whose emails start out by telling me how much they disagree with me but still love me, and those who find it necessary to respond to my posts with passive aggressive subtext posts. First of all, if you disagree with me but you still love me, that may be valid, but if you don't tell me what we disagree on, you're not committed to being my friend, because you're not committed to my understanding your perspective. You're not committed to you understanding my perspective. I don't agree with everything with all of my friends. And thank you for the comments that are coming in, Deb. I hope you guys watch this on the video and watch the comments, because they're being captured. Deb says that, after all, Georgia was established as a penal colony long before the horrific slavery of Africans and the genocide of Native Americans. And then comments that I'm unique and wonderful. And then we see T bringing their comments. Genetic studies have found early settlers. I should put my glasses on. I'm trying to read the screen. Sorry for the close-up, guys. The early settlers did have Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jewish people settled in the 15 and 1600s. Okay. T is talking about I was like, what does that have to do with this? But T is still talking about their genetic background. Guys, I want us to have the difficult conversations. Let's grow up beyond the notion that we have to agree about everything. Maybe if we just focus on what we could do to alleviate the things that we should be paying attention to, it would be a better use of our time and our energy. Things like food insecurity and housing insecurity, why kids aren't being taught better financial responsibility. Why aren't kids learning how to invest and how to save and how to leverage their time and their income in grade school and high school and beyond? Why millions of people continue to live without insurance or drug coverage? Why alcoholism and drug addiction continue to be stigmatized and mental health issues continue to be stigmatized, rather than becoming the focus of compassionate reform in our approach to healing and recovery? Why don't we look at the disparity, as Deb just mentioned, in the healthcare that's available, based on race, based on gender, based on socioeconomic status. We have so far to go to overcome racism and social injustice to bring about healing. Why not us be the ones who experiment with ways to do that? And maybe it starts by having those difficult conversations, by being willing to get a little bit uncomfortable. We might not always get it right, and that's okay. But when we do get it right, man, we can change the world. And that's what I wanted to say in response overall, an overarching response to the people who are blowing up my inbox. Rather than just attacking one another, what if we actually had the difficult conversations? I mean, I understand that there are people who disagree with my perspective on neo-paganism and how Leland got it wrong. But it's wild that so many people disagree and have conversations about it, but none of them are willing to have me on their podcast to discuss it. That should tell you everything you need to know about our society. We live in a world of make-believe facts, alternative facts. We live in a place where, as Dominic just said, hey there, brother, we need more spiritual people in the mental health and medical professions. Yeah, we do. We need more spiritual people, in the world in general. And spiritual people, not religious people, are people who are willing to get uncomfortable and have those difficult conversations. So if you're a podcaster, a Christian podcaster, a neo-pagan podcaster, a new age podcaster, and you disagree with the things that I write and talk about in my podcasts, and if you're interested in learning more about my feeling about why Leland and how Leland got it wrong, there's my book, Magic at the Crossroads, and it's available on Amazon. It's also available at inneralchemy.online. If you disagree with me, why aren't you having someone like me on your show to have that difficult discussion? because then I get to understand your perspective. You get to understand my perspective. We don't have to agree when it's all over with, but you'll also realize that I don't hate those who disagree with me. Same with the people who come from fundamentalist traditions. There's absolutely no reason that we can't get together and have this kind of a dialogue. And that's why I've dedicated this next chapter of my life and my broadcast life to having those difficult conversations. So we're starting out by I handed over the brew, the podcast that I've done for the last 4 years, to two amazing individuals. Annette and Michael will be taking over as the hosts and owners of that show, and we'll take it to wherever they feel led to take that talk show. And then this will be the Inner Alchemy broadcast will be gritty. They will be unpolished. There are two types of sort of approaches to podcasting, and one type is a very polished type of podcasting where every aspect of the podcast is art. And is beautiful, and it's every bit as breathtaking when it's done that way as a coffee table book, but a digital coffee table book, where people spend weeks and weeks and weeks just perfecting the look and the video and the video angles and everything about their broadcast. If that's what you're looking for, this ain't going to be for you because this is going to be raw and gritty. This is going to be where we have those difficult conversations, where we mess up at times. This is going to be one of those times where it's not, where it's not highly polished, but where it's highly compassionate, and where the people may not always agree with one another, but they respect one another, and they respect the fact that I think at the end of the day, so many of us, not all of us, I'm not delusional, but so many of us hold fast to the things we believe because we want to change the world. But, in order to change the world, we have to experiment. We have to be able to find out what works and what doesn't work. And like I said, we're not going to always get it right, but if we do it together, it's okay when we get it wrong, because we can always try a different way. So thanks for spending time with us tonight. Thank you for everybody who's commenting. I'll be sure to check out the rest of the comments. The longer I sit in front of the screen, the harder it becomes for me to be able to read the comments, because on my screen, they're like microscopic. They're not the size that they show up on Facebook. And I didn't think to have my glasses at the ready. The next broadcast, we'll be actually doing a broadcast next Wednesday, which will be about how to use social media if you are an artist or a spiritual practitioner, a pastor, a community leader, how to use social media effectively, including things like how we do these broadcasts without having to be a tech genius, without having to be obsessed about, making everything perfect, and without having to have the tech skills. We're going to start talking about that, because I think we live in a society where it's really important that, I think I just discovered why I can't read that on the screen. Yeah. So, okay. So, I told you this wasn't polished. I just realized there was a tab I could click on so that I can read your comments in real time. But we're gonna do that broadcast on how to use social media to build your brand in a post-pandemic world. Because there are so many people who are struggling, who have so much to be able to give to the world. And if I can help you learn how to do that more effectively on social media, I'm happy to do so. It's one of the other questions that I get asked so often, because many people know I started the world's first social network years before Facebook and Excite and MySpace. That was one of the co-founders of the world's first social network, and so I'm a geek and a nerd, and I'm passionate about this as much as I am about spirituality and social justice. So I would be happy to talk with you next week about that topic, and then on May the 4th. We'll be talking about, we'll be kicking off the new broadcast for Inner Alchemy, and there'll be more on your Facebook feed about that. I hope to see all of you here. Both of those broadcasts, the one next week and May the 4th, is at 8:00 Eastern time. That's 5:00 Pacific time and midnight Greenwich Mean Time. in the UK. So thank you for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you soon. And now I just have to figure out how to end the broadcast. Be sure to go ahead and drop a comment down below as I continue to look. And let us know where you're watching from. And I would really appreciate that. And let me know whether you would enjoy seeing more topics like this covered on